Hello, everybody. This is CJ Wiley with More Adventures on the Road. I've told you about several of the road partners I've had. One of them that I traveled mostly to the places that were hard to get out with the money for obvious reasons. His name was Chuck from Indiana, and he was a big, tough guy with a big, jolly good personality. So he was a really likable guy, but I told him one time, if the SHIT hits the fan, he's my first choice to team up with because he's got your back. And he told me one time, he says, "Hey, if we ever get into some kind of a bar brawl, just keep him off my back, and I'll whip the whole bar." He was right. I believe him. Anyway, we were in Memphis, Tennessee, and there's another guy we used to travel around with named Doug Smith, who was a really strong bar table player. First time I ever saw him, he played my partner and ran an 11 race to 11 set out in 2 innings. He put a 7 and a 4 on my friend, who got, I think, 2 shots the whole set. So we traveled around together too. But Chuck and him had already been to Memphis, and the place they played at, I believe it was the Horseshoe. It was owned by who they called Wheelchair Don, who was a named Don, and he was in a wheelchair, obviously, but he was a great pool player, and I think he won the national championships, and big gambler there in Memphis. But Doug and Chuck had beat him out over 10,000 the trip before, and when we went in there, Don jumped on him to gamble, and Chuck said that he was waiting for Doug and asked if he'd been there. Back then we didn't have cell phones, we just had pagers, so he said we were supposed to meet Doug, and of course that wasn't true, but Don said, of course, no, and the bartender was giving me trouble about looking too young. I was like 19 years old. I probably looked like I was 16. And they were giving me problems about being in the bar without an ID. But I showed them my Indiana ID that Chuck had got me. Mike Holtz, I've told you guys about. I was Mike from Indiana, Chris from Missouri, and Butch from Tennessee. But Mike was my main road name. And I showed him the ID. Of course, he had brown eyes and I had blue eyes. He was like 5'8", and I was 6 foot, but nobody seemed to notice that. She looked at the ID and turned it over, and, looking to see that it was fake, but it wasn't fake. It just wasn't me. But, of course, I just stood my ground, and we ended up just telling them that we were going to go see a movie. So we got out of there, but Don was really wanting to have a shot to get his money back from Chuck. So we left for a while. I don't think we even went to a movie. We just messed around, came back later. And when we went in there, Don said that I wasn't going to be able to stay in there. And because of my ID, they suspected that I was underage unless I gambled. So they had been talking to Chuck about me playing. I had got up there earlier and practiced, and of course shown them that I wasn't that good a player. And so they got on Chuck and said, if you don't gamble with us, that kid's going to have to leave. And that's exactly what Chuck was trying to get him to do. Chuck used to say, I don't have to be the smartest guy in the world. I just got to be the smartest guy in the room. And I would tell him, you're the smartest guy in the room because you got the best player in the room. And anyway, it was a good team because Chuck ended up matching up with a guy named Jerry Brock, who was a really strong player that was there in Memphis. And they offered me the 7-8 in the break on a bar table, and Chuck got him to bet 5,000. So we started out playing, and I was just going to try to stall with him, but I could tell right away I wasn't going to be able to stall because Jerry ran out every time he got a shot. So I told Chuck, I said, man, I'm not going to be able to stall with this guy. I'm going to have to go full tilt boogie. And Chuck was like, man, do whatever you got to do. Let's get the cash. So I turned it up a couple notches and went ahead and got the money. And after we were done, Wheelchair Don came rolling up, and his face was kind of red. You could tell he was a little angry, and he couldn't really find the words for a little while. And then he told Chuck, he said, man, he says, I want to be mad at you. He says, but I really can't. He says, because I made you guys play. And we kind of laughed, and a nervous laugh, and got out of there because, we didn't really want to wait around to see if they found out who I was. Back then, we didn't have the internet, pictures, and they couldn't ID me. And if they did, of course, I was Mike Hulse, who wasn't a pool player. So anyway, that's one of my stories with Chuck. We went down to Florida in an airbrush magic truck and beat him out of like 30,000. Later on, I got some stories about that too. We had some good times with my big buddy Chuck. Never had to keep him off his back, but I always felt pretty comfortable with him around. That no matter how much we won, we were getting out with the money. If you like this story, you can join me at www.masteringpocketbilliards, where I have road stories, but mostly all my instructional videos that shows all my championship level fundamentals, techniques, and systems I use to become one of the best players in the world, that I learned from some of the greatest road players and tournament players of the 20th century, and some in the 21st century too. Anyway, hope you all are having a great day. Till the next video, I'll see you then.